Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You're very welcome to the Trusteeship Council Chamber. We're about to get started, so if I could ask you to take your seats in the next moment or two, we should be ready to kick off then on time. Thank you.
Good afternoon. What a beautiful day. Secretary General, Executive Director, Excellencies, sisters, friends, Céad Míle Fáilte Roimhigh, as we say in our own language. You've all heard me say this, my colleagues, before. 100,000 welcomes to this special event in the company of some very special friends. Today's event is about girls. It's about our failure to educate 130 million adolescent girls globally. We believe that denies them a fair shot, a pathway out of poverty and inequality. It's a failure that shames us. Today we will say to you that in not providing all girls with a quality education, we are in fact failing ourselves. But we're here today because we believe that we are the ones who are still in with the chance of rectifying that, of giving girls that fair shot. I always say that gender equality means, to me, that boys and men have their rights and nothing more. Girls and women have their rights and nothing less. So today, it's about a drive beyond the usual rhetoric of these corridors and some of our complacency towards a drive towards actually doing something to end what we see as one of the great injustices of our time. Today is also a call for action. We're joined by Bono, the founder of One. He's here with us, and he has said that educating girls is not about charity, it's about investment. We know that girls are worth it. We are worth it. The experience of my own small country, Ireland, shows that when we invest in girls, they rise up. And when they rise up, they lead. Ask Mary Robinson about that. And we girls become women, women who rise up to lead families, to lead communities, occasionally, remarkably, even to lead delegations to the United Nations. We lead nations, we lead continents. But we can't lead if we're pushed back, if we're held back, if we're kept down. Fumzile and Alice Albright know that firsthand from their own work. The simple fact is education and equality are deeply intertwined. In this year of landmark anniversaries for gender equality, we want to acknowledge, and we have to, that the promises we made to millions, hundreds of millions of girls 25 years ago in Beijing have not been kept. We want to provoke today a collective action to correct that and to drive forward and to do it now. The Generation Equality Forum, convened by UN Women and co-hosted by France and Mexico later this year, could be our once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver, Today, Ireland is stepping up on a key platform ahead of Mexico City, ahead of Paris, with a call to action for the education of adolescent girls through our Drive for 5. We're calling on all nations to take 5 transformative actions for girls' educations to deliver on SDG 5, gender equality. Why is this so important to the Irish here today? Well, it's because we've lived it ourselves. Ireland transformed from one of the poorest countries in Europe into one of the most highly developed countries in the world in the space of just 2 generations. We are now recognizing that those 2 generations benefited hugely from free secondary education introduced in the 1960s. It was simply revolutionary, and particularly for girls. I'm a product of that free quality education, and I am so deeply grateful to those who made the right choices at the right time, the choices to invest in girls. Our journey towards gender equality in Ireland is far from complete, I would say, but we've seen at firsthand the results of that kind of investment. We've lived it. That's why the Irish government is committing to €250 million over 5 years to global education, putting focus on girls and education in emergencies. And that's why And that's really why I'm so happy to stand here today, to give girls a chance. I'm going to ask you for a very brief time, 3 minutes, to watch a video that explains to you our ideas about the 5 actions of the Drive for 5, and then we'll be back to you again.
Are my dreams equal to yours?
Are my hopes equal to yours?
Is my life equal to yours?
In Beijing, 25 years ago, we affirmed that education is a human right. It's essential for development and peace. Women and girls must have equal access to quality education to become agents of change.
25 years later, and much has been achieved.
But there is still so much more we can accomplish.
There is a global learning crisis. Millions of children worldwide cannot even read simple sentences, despite being in school, and 130 million girls are not even going to school at all.
130 million girls who are not being given an equal chance to grow, learn, dream, hope, and determine their own futures.
Educating adolescent girls is the catalyst for achieving gender equality, creating lasting peace, and generating sustainable development.
To get every single girl to school,
We need every single nation
To support the Drive for 5.
5 transformative actions to get all adolescent girls into school and reaching their potential.
You are the one person who can begin this transformation.
and guarantee me and every girl 12 years of free quality education.
give me the confidence to participate. Ensure there is a curriculum that responds to my needs.
Ensure there are girls' toilets and dignified access to menstrual hygiene facilities. Get men and boys on board, challenging the barriers that hold us back.
Let me develop the skills I need.
Provide me with quality and relevant education for life.
Delivered by trained and trusted teachers.
Keep me safe from violence.
Safe to go to school.
Safe in the classroom. Safe to go home.
Care about my physical and mental well-being.
My nutrition, water, health, and hygiene.
Providing all girls with relevant, high-quality education increases national prosperity, reduces poverty and inequality.
And educating girls can help build social cohesion, reduce conflict, and promote stability. Educating girls will improve the health and educating outcomes of future generations.
Eliminating gender inequalities in schools is a step towards an equal and sustainable world.
My dreams are equal to yours.
My hopes are equal to yours.
My life is equal to yours.
We are equals.
We are equals.
We are equals. Support the Drive for 5.
Together, we can educate all girls. Together, we can achieve gender equality. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm deeply honoured that we start that Drive for 5 today with the UN's finest feminist non-woman, our very own Secretary General, António Guterres. You do us the honor, Secretary General. You do us the honor of standing with us here today, Secretary General, but it's not just today. You stand with us every day. We know you don't believe this is women's work, and you're with us on board all the time. You're very, very welcome. Thank you, Secretary General.
Dear friends, all protocol observed, if you ask me what is the first priority for a better world, I would have no doubt to say quality education for all. And the first priority within the first priority is quality education for all girls. And the only way to reach one day effectively gender equality in our society is to make sure that we start by gender parity in our educational systems. And so I'm pleased to be with you to support this Drive for 5 call to action to educate adolescent girls. And I'm pleased to be sharing the stage with Mary Robinson and Bono, both of whom have shown in so many ways their commitment to furthering peace, human rights, sustainable development, and the principles of the United Nations. As Secretary General, but especially as a former teacher, I'm keenly aware of the vital importance of promoting education for adolescent girls. This is an indispensable foundation for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and for a better world. And I thank the Government of Ireland for bringing together young people, activists and educators around this critical subject, because education is necessary for success and well-being in all societies. And it is essential, as it was said already so many times here, for gender equality. A good education can boost a woman's quality of life and open doors to decent work opportunities. It can give women and girls the life skills they need to adjust to an uncertain future, to stand up to discrimination and violence, and to make decisions about health care, including sexual and reproductive health. More broadly, education benefits children, families, and societies through helping reduce poverty and enhancing economic growth. This year, we celebrate 25 years since the Beijing Conference on Women. We have made great strides in the last quarter of century, so important gaps remain. It's true, more girls are in school than ever before. More countries have reached gender parity in education enrollment. However, while there is more parity at primary level, adolescent girls are still dramatically disadvantaged. And in addition, the rising rates of female education have not shifted deeply entrenched occupational segregation in both developed and developing countries. The global gender pay gap stands at an unrelenting 20%. And despite doing just as well as boys in the classroom, social and institutional barriers still discourage girls from taking up careers based on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM. This is something we are especially highlighting today on the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. Today we celebrate the achievements of women scientists and emphasize the need for girls to have equal access to STEM education and to the career opportunities these skills provide. These are the careers of the future, and we cannot achieve gender equality in our societies without women playing an equal role. I strongly believe that gender equality is essentially a question of power. We still live in a male-dominated world with a male-dominated culture, but we have to recognize that progressively we have been able to balance things, even if we are far from gender equality and gender parity in today's world. But one of the most worrying trends I'm witnessing today is the fact that in technological professions, and especially in the Silicon Valleys of this world, we have an even more male-dominated culture and male-dominated situation. And let's not forget that these centers are the centers that are shaping, with their technologies, the economies and the societies of the future. So if we don't reverse this trend, and if we do not have real parity in women and men defining the technologies of the future, designing the technologies of the future, we risk to have the present trend of balancing power relations between men and women be reversed again. And so education of girls, but education of girls in the areas of STEM is absolutely essential from the point of view of gender equality in the future. Fair education for girls is also central to tackling poverty. Around the world, there are millions of adolescent girls whose education has stalled because of poverty, inadequate school sanitation facilities, unpaid care duties, and harmful cultural practices such as child marriage. We also have to add those who had to leave school because of war and civil unrest, natural disasters, and humanitarian crises. Addressing these issues means working to overturn deeply rooted stereotypes and social norms that see women and girls as less deserving of an education or that limit which subjects they have access to. Investments must be made in building new skills so that young women are equipped for the changing world of work, and in mobile learning so that education is accessible to women and girls everywhere where they are. So today's event could not be more timely. Education is an essential pillar of a better future for adolescent girls, but for all the society. And this year of anniversaries of Beijing and Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, and throughout the UN Decade for Action to deliver the SDGs, the priorities, voices and rights of adolescent girls must be at the center of our intergenerational change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Secretary General, for your continued leadership, and you truly are a gender champion for all of us. In this next segment, we're going to hear 5 powerful young voices explaining what the 5 actions mean. So please give a very warm welcome to Nibras Kudidaida, Mohammed Sidibe, Sanita Alizada, Marie-Claire Cabaramanzi, and Aisling O'Boyle, please.
She has a desk. My name is Nibras Kudidaida, and I'm 21 years old. I advocate for every girl's right to learn because at one point I was denied mine. I grew up in a 500-person village in northern Iraq. One day, I was walking home, celebrating the fact that I'd been just named Student of the Year for achieving the highest GPA. All of a sudden, I saw crowds of people fleeing and screaming. I had known that ISIS was coming, but now they were only 2 miles away from our village. My friends start running to find their families, fearing that they would be left behind. Drones flew overhead. Peshmerga fighters moved in, pushed back by the ISIS advance. I do not remember how I got to my house. My family only had time to grab our passports and IDs. We fled to Erbil. The city was full of people who harassed me because I'm a Yazidi, a minority religion there. I tried to enroll in school, but they wouldn't accept me without having a signed transcript. My father and I had to return to our old village, where ISIS was only 2 miles away, to get the principal to sign the transcript. At the top of the mountain, I could see their flags and members of ISIS. It was the most terrifying moment in my life. I put my life at rest that day because I wanted more for myself than house chores. I wanted to be more than a wife or a daughter. I wanted a brighter future. And I knew that education is the best way to achieve that. 130 million girls are out of school today, and more than 2/3 are of secondary school age. Conflict, poverty, gender-based violence, inadequate sanitary provision, and early child marriage stop them from learning. Like me, they're fighting for their right to learn, but it seems like they're fighting alone. The global community is spending less than half of the amount it needs on education. This lack of funding is not only limiting girls, but it's limiting our world. Because when girls go to school, everyone benefits. Educated girls reduce conflict, improve public health, and promote environmental sustainability. If every girl received 12 years of free, safe, quality education, women's lifetime earnings could increase by up to $30 trillion. The evidence is there, yet the will from leaders is not. I'm here to remind you what you should know, what every girl fighting for her right to learn already knows. The best investment you can make in the future of our world is to educate girls. Thank you.
She is confident. Why am I here to talk about adolescent girls' education? Because men and boys need to do our part to help this generation. This is not a girls' issue. History has shown time and time again that when we educate girls, we progress. But when we don't, they suffer. Society as a whole suffer. See, education empowers and imbues girls with confidence, the confidence needed to achieve their goals, to challenge conventions, and to change societies. Gender-sensitive curriculums, mentorship, leadership training are integral to unlocking these opportunities for girls. And yet, adolescent girls battle every day because of structural barriers we men have put in place. Negative social norms, lack of menstrual hygiene facilities, child marriage, and pregnancy, just because they are girls. So we, men and boys, we need to be allies in the struggle. We need to do our part, and we must be on the right side of history on this one. And we need to help organizations that are at the forefront of this fight, like the Global Partnership for Education and many more. See, I know how it feels to be deprived of your education. When I was 5, the rebels came to my village and murdered my entire family. And it took me to be a former child soldier. From 5 to 9, I saw the worst of humanity. I want you to imagine what you were doing when you were 5, being deprived of education. The first time I stepped foot in a classroom, I was 10 years old. I couldn't read or write. I was homeless in a post-Civil War Sierra Leone. At 25 years old, 27, I'm getting old. At 27 years old today, I'm in my second year of law school here in New York. I'm getting ready to start my summer associate position at an international law firm of Covington and Berlin. I am a byproduct of fortuitous education, but no child should ever have to rely on fortuity to get that which is rightfully theirs, quality education. So again, why am I here? Well, I'm here because 99.99% of the people who've had the biggest impact in my life, who have changed my views of the world, have been women. And it behooves me if I don't come here and support them. This is not a girl's issue. This is a world issue. And right now, we are crawling, but we must walk, and that walk entails providing girls quality education and providing every child quality and inclusive education. Thank you.
بذار حرفایی به تو بگم به در
فریاد به جای سکوت یک زن، فریاد به جای عمق زخمای ایتن، فریاد از جسمی که تقف از قصه شد، زیر فشار قیمت و شما شکسته شد. به 15 سال منه از شهر هراتم چند نفر اومدن خواسته گریم گیجوماتم از یادم و رسم ازدواج دختر با پول میفروشن بدون حق انتخاب. حال بحث پدرم خارج آب نونه، هر کی پول بیشتر بده دختر مال اونه. اگه میفهمیدم خارج کتاب میکنیم، اگه میفهمیدم لقمه ها حساب میکنی، با شکم گرسنه از سفره برمیگشتم یا که تمونده غذاها شمار برمیدشتم. به مثل کل دخترام هم تخونه بندیم از چشم خانواده و مردم که فندلندیم که هر دم تاکید میکنن که وقت فروش منه. ما مادمون به خدایی هم چشو گوش منه. کجا دیدین گسفن از کشتن خوشاکی باشه؟ کجا دیدین گسفن اینقدر احساساتی باشه؟ به خدا نمیتونم از شما دور باشم، هیچ وقت شما نمیفروشم حتی مجبور باشم. ولی شما از چی بگم؟ میفهمم مر به دنیا آوردیم بابت چی بودم؟
My name is Sunita Alizadeh. I'm a rapper and an activist from Afghanistan. I was sold into marriage twice as a child bride. However, I escaped that fate, and now I'm a college student. Growing up, my family couldn't see the value in education, so I stayed home. I was taught to be a wife because that value was clear. They would receive a dowry, and they believed that I would be protected by a husband. When I was young, my family fled Afghanistan to escape the Taliban. So I grew up as an undocumented refugee in Iran. And by law, I was not allowed to go to school. But I found an NGO that provided basic education to young, undocumented refugees like me. One day, my family called me, and for the second time in my life, told me that it was time to marry. I couldn't breathe. So many of my friends had gotten married, and their educations were over. Child marriage traumatizes the bodies, minds of girls. All the girls that I knew wanted to stay in school, wanted to learn. I did too. I was desperate to help my family to understand, so I wrote Daughters for Sale, the rap song. And by the help of Rukhsar Qaim Maqami, a filmmaker, I came to the United States, and my dream of having a real education came true. We must recognize that girls' potential and values are infinite. Girls need to be educated. They need to be more than wives and mothers. Through education, they can learn the skills that can help them to pursue a path of their choice. Simple access to education isn't enough. Girls need quality education delivered by trained teachers. By empowering young girls, they can become the leaders, the peace builders of tomorrow for the next generation. And I believe this can happen. And I know that my education is worth so much more than a dowry. And I wish this for every child in this world. Thank you.
She's safe. My name is Marie Claire. I'm 23 years old. Growing up in the Congo, I didn't go to school. With war after war, shooting after shooting, my main focus was staying safe. The conflict in my home country became so violent that my family fled to Zambia. It was then, at the age of 11, that I had the chance to go to school for the first time in my life. But my family was still in danger. As refugees, we faced discrimination, and harassment. Every time I left our house to go to school, someone would yell at me to go back to my country or tell me that I was eating what wasn't mine. In class, I was too scared to concentrate. I wanted nothing more than to learn, but I was consumed with fear. I knew I wasn't safe on the street, at home, or in school. One night, armed robbers broke into our house with the intent to take a life. I watched as they killed my mother. She sacrificed herself to protect me and my siblings. Conflict changed my life forever. It took away my mother and countless others. It kept me out of school until the age of 11, and it continues to prevent girls around the world from reaching their full potential. Over 1/3 of out-of-school children are not in class because of conflict, and girls in emergency situations are 2.5 times more likely to be out of school than boys. Even in settings free from conflict, harassment, and gender-based violence still stops adolescent girls from going to school. 3 years ago, I achieved what at one point I didn't think was possible. I graduated from high school. Now I'm in university, 3rd year, studying to be a nurse. After witnessing so much violence, I want to learn the skills to help and heal my community. As nursing students, we learn that the best way to support patients is to put yourself in their shoes and imagine what it's like to have experienced what they're experiencing. I want leaders to do the same today. Leaders here and even out there, anyone that is listening to me. If leaders put themselves in girls' shoes, they would know that dedicating just 2.1% of global humanitarian aid to education is not enough. They would see that every day, girls like me have to make a choice between being safe or going to school. What would you choose if it was you? If leaders put themselves in girls' shoes, they would understand not only the challenges we face, but they would also understand our potential. If we are a generation of future nurses, lawyers, and engineers who are ready to build a safer, healthier, and wealthier world. But until leaders support safe and quality education in emergency situations, the world will continue to miss out on what girls have to offer. Thank you.
She is healthy. As a girl, I was very lucky. Lucky to be born in Ireland, where I was guaranteed the same quality of education as my brother. Lucky to never go to school hungry. Lucky because I knew I would be able to choose when and if I would marry and have children. But this shouldn't be luck. This should be what every single girl grows up expecting. Ensuring that a girl has 12 years of quality education is about so much more than providing her with a teacher, a pen, and a book. She needs to be healthy, happy, and safe. She must be healthy so that she can focus, work hard, and dream big. Nutrition programs that recognize adolescent girls' vulnerability to iron deficiency anemia need to be provided. At the 63rd Commission on the Status of Women, we affirmed that girls require access to safe and private water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities to ensure that they do not miss school when they have their periods. She must be happy in herself so that she can avoid mental health difficulties, including eating disorders. In a global survey, 8 in 10 girls reported that they have opted out of daily activities, including raising their hands in class, because they're concerned about the way they look. By establishing mentoring, peer support, and extracurricular programs, we can ensure that all girls value themselves and are valued by their communities so that they can be engaged in all aspects of school life. She must be safe so that she is free from coercion. Globally, the leading cause of death of girls aged 15 to 19 is complications arising from pregnancy and childbirth. 50% of all sexual assaults are committed against girls under 16. Girls and boys urgently need to be provided with comprehensive, scientifically accurate, age-appropriate sexuality education that teaches them about safe sex and consent. We must also address the underlying drivers of adolescent pregnancy, such as patriarchal norms, poverty, and child marriage, and ensure that all girls are able to return to school after they have had a child. Girls and young women are the experts on our own needs and lived realities, and we must have the opportunity to be involved with decisions that shape our lives. To achieve the SDGs, we must put the education of girls where it belongs, at the very heart of the development agenda. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. It's so important that we hear young voices, that those young voices penetrate these walls. Your voices pull us above our abstract debates in this House, so thank you very much indeed for your resilience and your determination. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary-General is now obliged to leave us for another appointment. Thank you, Secretary-General, if you would show your appreciation as he leaves. So friends, we're now going to move to our panel discussion, and I'm delighted to invite our panelists to the stage. Our discussion today will be led by our very own in-house warrior for gender equality, Executive Director of UN Women from Zile and Mlabo and Guka. From Zile, as you know, is the former Deputy President of South Africa, veteran of her country's apartheid struggle. And from Zile, I think you embody our fierce determination not to accept being kept down. Also moving up to join us on the stage is Bono, founder of One, a global movement to eradicate extreme poverty and preventable disease. Bono, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're actually the only man I know who's featured at the Glamour Woman of the Year Award, something I've aspired to myself in the past. You did overcome huge adversity by your own admission there by being a millionaire white dude. So, and if that's not enough, this Irish dude also plays a mean guitar and is known to lead a band or two in his spare time. Mary Robinson, this House knows you well. You're the woman who convinced a generation in Ireland that women don't just rock the cradle, but we can rock the system too. I'm really proud to say we got that message in Ireland early, and we elected you as the first female president of Ireland.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. You were in office during the heady Beijing years, and you later, of course, were UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and UN Envoy on Climate Change. Today you're here as the Chair of the Elders. And Alice Albright, our Chief Executive Officer of the Global Partnership for Education, a powerful partnership and a fund which is working with 65 developing country governments, as well as donor governments and civil societies, dedicated to achieving equitable quality and learning, quality education and learning for all. And finally, you don't really need to be introduced. Nibras, you've already come to us. 21-year-old, she described to you her birth as a young Yazidi woman in northern Iraq. She didn't speak any English when she came here in 2015, and now she's studying economics at a university. I think that says it all. So take it away from Zile. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I will say all protocol observed.
because I'm sure you really want to hear the people who are sitting here. I want to start by thanking the Government of Ireland for hosting this event, express all our appreciation for these young leaders who have spoken to us, of course, to the Secretary General and to you, Ambassador, for your wise words. Education, as it has been said all over again, is the best investment we can ever make for the future of humanity. It is also the one thing that we can give girls so that they can save themselves. And the nice thing about education is that once it has been given, it can never be taken away. It is also a public good that can be given to all at the same time. There is no competition. All can learn at the same time, and all can thrive. It has the capacity to unearth talent on everybody. Mandela used to say, a child in the village who has access to education will be the head of a mine, because education enables anybody who has had adequate access to make a difference. We have this year a very big mission, ambition, as we commemorate Beijing 25. We want to fulfill the dream, to accelerate, to scale up our initiatives. In order to do that, we have consolidated those areas that we have not been able to move as far as we wanted to when we've been implementing the Beijing platform in the last 25 years, even though we have made amazing progress, especially in the area of education. But we know that we are not there yet. And education is a cross-cutting theme in this work. The areas that we're going to be pushing forward under generation equality, which recognizes the important role of young people, is gender-based violence, economic justice and rights, bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights, feminist action for climate change, technology and innovation for gender equality, feminist movements, and leadership. And in all of these areas, we want to involve and infuse education in the best possible way to get us to move forward. So as we sit here, we are going to hear from the speakers who are here. And I'll start by asking a question to all of you. And I will start with you, Mary, recognizing that in Beijing, education was one of the critical areas and was embraced by everybody. But also the girl child was profiled in Beijing. We used to talk about children. It was only in Beijing that the African women fought to say we want something to be said about the girl child. And that opened Pandora's box, because then child marriage, FGM, being denied education, all of those issues came out. Hard work has been done on education. Investments, limited as they may be, have been made on education, and yet in 2018, 500 million women and girls 15 years and over worldwide still lack basic education. What's up, Mary?
Well, first of all, I'd like with you to salute the 5 who spoke so well before, and of course the Secretary General, but really, I'm very glad that we have Nislam, who will join us on the panel, but I thought it was just remarkable how well they captured the issues that we want to talk about. The case was made profoundly for how important it is for the economies of countries that we educate girls and educate quality education. I mean, that was something that I think, as Marie-Claire said, if leaders would put themselves into the shoes and minds of young people, of young girls who are deprived of education, that would help. And I think you've tried a lot yourself and UN Women, your team, to get heads of state, male or female, and they're mostly male still, to take on this issue of forwarding the position of the girl child. It has to become a real political priority. And it isn't yet enough of a priority. The fact that 130 million girls are deprived and 39, a very significant proportion don't go on to secondary education. That's the real issue. So how do we make it a real political priority where the value, the economic value, the development value, the sustainable development value, the value in tackling issues like climate justice that I'm very concerned about, as you know, all of those issues will benefit if we make it a political priority to enable girls to take those 5 steps and have the 12 years of quality education. That's all it takes. It means budgets, it means resources, but it's the political will at the highest level. And, that's what we have to work on this year in support of you and Beijing Plus 25.
So Mary says we need the political will. It has to be a top priority for those who are political decision makers. Bono, from your perspective, from where you sit, what do you identify as a critical barrier to the success we so crave for?
Wrong age, wrong gender, but I am Irish. And as a superwoman there, Geraldine pointed out, we were greatly enhanced. Our entire success as a country has come from investments in education, so much so. And my own, I've done very well out of education. That's where I met the 3 members of U2 and my missus, as it happened, in a comprehensive on the north side of Dublin. What is the biggest obstacle? The obstacle in the way of all of us here today, Mary's just alluded to. And the Secretary General has just left the building, so I think we can talk about him behind his back. He is sitting in his chair at probably the most difficult time for a Secretary General since this building was built in, whenever it was, the 50s, early 50s. Nehemiah and Corbusier, whatever, who built it. Amazing building. It's amazing that it exists. And it might not exist, is the truth, unless we work to keep it in business. And he is facing extraordinary challenges. And probably at the top of his list is what you would say, which is the climate crisis. And it's the climate crisis that makes me listen extra hard to our 5 here tonight, because it's a very complex political, economic, scientific set of problems. And we're not going to figure it out without everybody here. It's the climate crisis may be man-made, but it's likely to be woman-solved. And we're not going to save Mother Earth with just our sons. Our daughters are necessary. My daughter's kind of roughly your own age there. She tells me there's no place on earth where there is gender parity. So I think actually maybe it's not an obstacle. It's a sink or swim situation. The climate crisis is so extraordinary. I think of one of these girls who today is not getting access to education will be one of those girls that tomorrow finds that innovation that unlocks the climate crisis. I mean, we think of the climate crisis as a very simple thing, but this entire building is made out of carbon. The city of New York, just look around, it's all carbon. It's not just as we all know this, it's not just the obvious. So we really need brilliant, brilliant women. So it's not just access to the classroom, it's access to the science lab, to government. And so I think that's probably, I think the patriarchy, as my daughter refers to me as, the thing that might save us is we're just not stupid enough to not ask for help from all that we can find it. And that means women and access to education. Is that kind of an answer? And that was an amazing 5 years, super group sort of thing. You should form a band, tour, play Madison Square Gardens. Great. Thank you to the Irish government too.
Thank you. Political will, climate, and Bono, we really appreciate your daughter is doing a good job in educating you. Yes. We salute her. Let me move now to somebody who leads an organization that lives and breathes education, that works in the parts of the world that where girls are not likely to see the light of day if people like you don't turn up. So Alice, you have really intense insights to the problem. Pick up the thing that keeps you awake at night, which is the biggest challenge.
Well, Fumsile, thank you very much, and I'd like to start by thanking the government of Ireland. There, nice to see you, and it's a great pleasure to be up here with everybody. There are lots of reasons to do with what I would call the details of education itself, but I really would like to talk to you about power, because that's behind a lot of the things that we worry about. What do I mean by power? In one of the countries that we work with, close to 1/3 of the cases of why girls have dropped out of school is because their decisions were made by their fathers that they did not want their daughters in the classroom with a male teacher. In another country, childhood marriage accounts for 15 to 20% of the reasons why girls drop out, and I think that's probably a low estimate. In another country, there are specific policies that prevent girls who are pregnant from getting to go back to school. Yet, and many of this has been done in settings like this, we have treaties, we have conventions, we have goals, and all kinds of things that are grounded in the principles of gender equality, but we are not observing them. So how do we fix the problem? We have to put women and girls into the decision-making process. Too often they are not in the classroom, they are not administrators, they are not leaders of their countries, and all too often they do not feel safe enough to even go close to the classroom. In my job, I have the privilege of traveling all over the world and meeting with heads of state, ministers, leaders all over. And while we've seen a little bit of progress here and there, we are falling backwards. So what do we need to do? We need to stand up as citizens of the globe and hold governments to account and tell them what the problem is. I think that all the stories that you told were remarkable, and at the heart of being able to tell the reason why education needs to be at the top of the agenda is being educated yourself. So we need to get angry, we need to be outraged by this, and hold governments to account about why they are not putting education, particularly for girls, at the top of the agenda.
Thank you. Nibras, you are a young person, obviously with a very fresh insight also into this issue. One thing that is wonderful about young people is that when they fight these issues, they don't have vested interest. All they want is the solution unlike us sometimes as old people, you are fighting, you're thinking about your bond, you're thinking about your marriage, you're thinking about your car.
It's very
you
hurtful.
don't have anything except the cause that you dedicate yourself to. So you bring a different perspective to this. Why do you think this problem persists?
First of all, I want to thank everybody. Thank you for the Ireland government for having me here today and bringing a new perspective to the table. As I mentioned in my speech, there are 130 million girls out of school, and almost 3/4 are of secondary school age. While these reasons girls are out of school varies from countries and communities. For girls like me and my fellow Malala Fund activist Mary Claire, the reason was conflict. For others, it's child marriage, gender-based violence, inadequate sanitary provision, and early child marriage, which is one of the biggest issues in my own community that prevents girls from learning. I think we need, as a way to address those issues, we need an urgent global action. But world leaders are failing to invest the necessary resources. The annual cost of educating all children, low and medium countries, is $3 trillion. Today, less than half of that amount is being spent. And also Malala Fund research shows that only 10% of that amount is going towards 10 countries where their girls face the greatest challenges and do not have access to education. I think the lack of political will from leaders stems partly that leaders do not listen to girls. Too often, the experience of girls are ignored, and decisions about our futures are made without our consideration. Girls are the one who understands the barriers that's preventing us from access to learning. How can leaders hope to develop a sustainable solutions without giving us a seat at the table? I also think that gender discrimination plays a big part. Decades of research shows that educating girls promote economic growth and a more sustainable environment and a lasting peace. Yet, this overwhelming evidence, leaders are not taking the necessary step to invest in girls' education. And the only reason, I can only assume it's because they don't believe in the power of girls. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mary, you have seen it all. You have been a head of state, you have been a leader here in the UN, you've been an activist, you've been a teacher, you are a climate activist, you are a chair of the elders. So you are able to see this from many angles. But we know that when we talk about education, sometimes we talk a lot about enrollment numbers. How could we make sure that it is not just the enrollment and the numbers that we talk about, but the quality? What do you think girls should be learning at school in order for them to get valuable experience out of education?
I think it's true that, as the Secretary General puts such emphasis on, that the STEM subjects are extraordinarily important. But the quality education, motivated teachers, and an environment that girls feel safe in, girls feel encouraged, that's also very important. As you said, I've had experiences that stay with me, and one of the experiences is very much what Sonia was talking about and what is also has been touched on. It's the impact of early child marriage. I remember the elders took on early child marriage because we knew there were quite a number of organizations dealing with it, but they were actually very much below the radar because it was a sensitive subject. It was a taboo subject in many countries. We even talk about it. And we went to Ethiopia, to the Amhara region in 2011, I remember. And I just remember a village where girls were, where the whole village was trying to deal with this. And we had girls who were married, and then we had schoolgirls in front of us. And afterwards, we were allowed to meet some of them individually. And I remember being with Archbishop Tutu when he asked this girl a question. He said, "Tell me about your wedding day." And she looked at him with such sadness, and she said, "That was the day I had to leave school." You know, and I'll never forget that. Just a simple reality. That was the day I had to leave school. That was the end of my dream. And so I think, you know, power, as Alice said, is a lot of it. But why is it that we're far from getting on top of the proper budgeting for education? I think it is precisely because we haven't yet made the argument convincingly enough about the economic benefits and the sustainable development benefits and the climate action benefits. Bono, you've been stealing my lines, by the way. But
always.
You're welcome.
Since the very beginning.
And, you know, I do think that we need to get the point across. Let's just think about the voices of young girls today on the climate issue. You know, Greta Thunberg and others. I mean, what impact that has made. I was talking about climate justice for a long time. I couldn't get across the intergenerational injustice until girls started to speak out, and speak out so forcefully and so well. And, you know, so on all of the issues that we want to deal with, and all of the capacity that it unleashes, it's to make that connection for political leaders and those who wield power. The Commission on the Status of Women is going to have its usual session next month. Is it going to have a day on, you know, where the adolescent girl will take over?
Yes.
Because that would be very important. That would be at the table and being listened to. And I think that would really make a difference.
Thank you, Mary. So we need to make sure that we don't only have the budget that is appropriate for the job that has to be done, but we also are equipping the girls to speak their truths, as they do. Once you've made that possible, they are unstoppable.
As we've seen.
We've all learned that, and Bono is getting it at home. Bono, you've been involved in many outstanding initiatives. It's nice to sit next to a true rock star. Doesn't happen to me every day. I tell you, that's why I'm saying.
Bono, why don't you take those 5 actions that I've talked about in very simple language and make a massive song?
Yes. Well, I actually first came across Sunita as an artist. I don't know if you know this, Sunita, but I heard your work a few years ago. I was mesmerized by it. You'd do a better job than I on girls' education. I have a funny feeling, but I do like the Drive for 5. There was a Drive for 5 initiative at home, but it was about the Dublin team getting back the game. But I like the cohesion of the Drive for 5, and I like the 5-year anniversary. And yes,
think about it.
I'm at your service as always.
So we know that education is an enabler. Is a groundbreaker. You have been involved in spearheading the successful campaigns against HIV and AIDS, which fundamentally altered the global approach to that issue. What can we do in the case of education to get the same effect?
They're very different. But first, can I pick up on what you were speaking about child marriage, which is really taken, just because there's another marriage that sits on, which is the marriage between poverty and inequality. And that is also a marriage made in hell. And equality and poverty, that's the larger context. And we in the One campaign, we work on that. As to my experience fighting this tiny little virus that wreaked so much havoc in so many lives, there was a lot of groups involved who deserve credit. The thing about picking a fight with that disease was, it was a very simple thing. We knew it was a very complex problem to solve. Just the expense of antiretroviral drugs and getting universal access was difficult. But having the 2 pills that it took at the time to keep you alive, I could just walk into any finance minister or anyone, any leader anywhere, and just say, look, you have these pills, you live, you don't have these pills, you die. They sort of symbolized inequality. And I was saying, you know, where you live should not determine whether you live. Now, a single chromosome should not determine what doors are open or closing in your face. I think that it's a more complex thing, fighting for education, because it's not so easy. You don't see the bodies. I mean, to put it really coarsely. And I remember those bodies and what they look like. It's more of an invisible disease, but it is a killer. It is a disease. And we won't see the effects of it so quickly, but they will be catastrophic. I think it's already happening. I think it's gratefully, you know, younger people, women, powerful women like Greta or Malala, or the people we've heard today are already doing this. And I think that we just have to, and I just have to try and help in ways like this, help to convene, but stay in the background probably more. But be angry, I think, as Alice said. I think it's okay to be angry, and I was so grateful that Mohammed, you were there as well, with these powerful women, because we screwed it up. So we do have to help with the solution, but it's a different campaign. I haven't quite got the answer to it, but I think the Irish government are doing really good in taking this complex stuff on, and they reflect the will of the people, and indeed all the parties in our country are pro this.
And of course, you've seen the impact of education firsthand in Ireland. So you speak from really a place of knowing what you can get, what you can be.
Absolutely transformative.
Yeah. Alice, you work in all parts of the world. You work with children that are vulnerable and deprived in so many ways. And the whole notion of quality education can be so distant in those countries. That is where we sometimes are, in the first place, just happy that we got them to be in the classroom. At the same time, we know that quality education is actually important. So what do you think needs to happen for us to drive this transformative change that is centered on quality education?
Thanks again, Phumzile. So a few thoughts. First of all, I think we need to not keep framing the question around what do girls need, but ask them what they think we need. And I think we've got some powerful examples in the room right here. We have to, and people have touched on this, we've got to engage not just women in the classroom, but also the entire community, which absolutely includes men, fathers, brothers. We also have to study what makes sense in every different context. It would be very tempting to think that this problem can be solved with one single silver bullet solution that will just solve everything. The answer is that is not true. And we have to study what is happening country after country after country and enable those countries to do what they think makes sense. And we've seen examples of this. We've seen it in Kenya, where they've taken some very important decisions about improving quality in the classroom. We are beginning to see it with this current government in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We've seen it in Malawi and Afghanistan, where enrollment rates are going up. So we need to help these governments develop the political will and the resources they need to make the right decisions. And I come back to a point that I made earlier about mobilizing the masses. We need to give everybody the tools they need to continue to make the case to their governments, get mad, and begin to make the case about why this is such a critical issue for the future of countries, whether or not it's climate change, security, economic prosperity, being ready for the jobs of the future, you name it.
Thank you. We have also seen how partnerships make a difference when many partners work together, work with the grassroots and communities and parents and international together, we begin to move the needle. But obviously we are not there, so there's something we are searching for right now. And Nebraska, you have some really difficult personal experience, and thank God you are here. You have been able to overcome some of those challenges. So what would you say is the single most important intervention that can help us to address education, but also, that could help us to access education, but at the same time address gender inequality? Is it norms and stereotypes in our societies? Is it policies? Is it finance and budgets? What would you say from where you sit is a top priority?
I think it's time for those in the position of authorities to match our ambitions. This means change at every level, from teachers and parents to presidents and prime ministers. At the local level, we need to break down the harmful norms that limits girls' potential. I know what it's like to live in a community where all you're expected is to be a wife or a mother. I know what's like to not have the same opportunities as my brother. I know what's like to want more for yourself, but you've been told no because of your gender. And we must change these mindsets because these are stopping girls every day from thriving. At the same time, changing norms is not the only solution, and it's not enough to see every girl in school. From government, it requires more and better funding to education. This means increasing education budget and ensuring that funding actually benefit girls. And every day we're in this world where girls are fighting to go to school. Whether you're leading a classroom or a country, we need people in power at every level because we can do more and can do better for girls.
Amen. Amen. We have had thought-provoking questions, not just for the panel here, but also from what the young people said earlier, as well as what we heard from the Secretary General. We are a little bit running out of time, so I'm just going to ask you and not tell you what you have to say, the last word that you want to leave with the audience.
I want to really encourage this moment for you as well, and UN Women, where you are leading a movement to revitalize what Beijing meant 25 years ago. I'm delighted that you put climate into the agenda because that wasn't dealt with 25 years ago. We've moved on. But what we need is the kind of spirit that was there 25 years ago, that brought so many women together from all over the world. We have moved on in some areas, but as Alice said, we're slipping back on access to quality education, the 12 years girls' education. That's not acceptable for the reasons we've all been talking about. So, on to Mexico, on to Paris, a real awakening of a movement that links with what's happening in the intergenerational approach to climate change. The fact that young people are giving such leadership in that. Let's really try and harness the energies to crack this. This shouldn't be an issue in the 21st century. Yeah. This is a right, a human right, affirmed again 25 years ago. The world will benefit hugely from it in so many different ways. Every community will benefit from it. We've got to get this message across. We've got to, under your leadership, really move things this year. So good luck with that. No pressure at all.
Bono.
That's amazing. correct. Well, I've been learning a lot from my daughter. I've also learned a lot from my wife, Ali, who said something to me that is subtle but very powerful, as she is. She said, don't look down at me, don't look up at me, look across to me. That's where I am. So let's get away from the vertical and into the horizontal in our relationships on these issues. Love is, if I could define it, it would be something to do with the realizing of another's potential. And the squandering of that potential is the opposite to love. Other women I'm learning from is today I'm here working for and with Gail Smith, who runs the One organization. She's sitting right there. She runs RED. She runs One. She ran the budget for Barack Obama's development. She had on her desk, girl boss in the White House. That girl there, she's a woman. And that's all I have to say.
Okay.
You know I have you.
Alice, your parting shots?
Thank you again, Phumzile. I think we know the policy and the detail and the technical answers to answer the question. Those answers are not going to come overnight, and the impact of those are not going to come overnight. But we've got to understand that this is a marathon and get in it for the marathon and understand that it is going to take us a while, but the dividends are going to pay off across many dimensions of the international agenda. Standing back from the details, we have to remember that this is what girls want, this is their right, this is their future, and they are entitled to it. So we need no other better answer to why we need to stick with it than that. This is what girls want.
Yeah. Nibras.
I just want to say that I have been very unlucky to experience what's like to learn in an unsupportive environment and to be discriminated because of my religion and my gender. On the other hand, I've been very lucky to experience the quality education that I received in the United States as a refugee when I got here. And I just want to say, in 2018, I graduated from high school and became the first person in my family to be able to do so. Wow. And I will never forget the feeling of turning my tassel, throwing my cup, and walking through the stage into a future full of possibilities. What I want is every single girl to know what's that feeling.
That's great.
Well, as we have heard today, these questions we are asking actually have got answers. The answers already exist. We just need to implement and to take the action. You've also heard that there is deep commitment to bring about the change. We heard from the SG earlier. We heard from the ambassador. We heard from the generation. We've heard from this panelist. So I know that if all of you were to speak in this room, we would hear even more reasons and more evidence to prove that there is commitment. So this has to be a battle we are going to win. It is intergenerational, and when I talk intergenerational, I'm also talking about the mothers who are illiterate. In the report on the 25 years of Beijing, something that really shocked me was how much we did not move on literacy. The level of literacy of women is just as high as it was 25 years ago. This is a neglected area. And if mothers are not literate, we then create problems for the girls. So this is also an area that needs our collective attention. Thank you so much. You have been a wonderful audience. I just regret that we did not offer you an opportunity to speak and to share. but we really appreciate your being here today. Thank you, Ireland.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as the panelists leave, before we conclude the afternoon, we're going to have a few thoughts from Mary Robinson, reflections from Mary, and we will then conclude the afternoon with a short musical performance. Mary Robinson.
Thank you, Geraldine, and thank you, Ireland. And dear friends, we have heard some wonderful speeches already, and I have the honour to conclude. And I'd like to start by remembering that in 2018, a young girl sat through rain, hail, and shine outside the Swedish Parliament every Friday for a year and changed the world. Greta Thunberg and thousands, indeed millions of girls and young people right around the globe have done more to advance the cause of climate action and bring it to public consciousness than scientists and politicians have achieved through their decades of advocacy. Through their informed, courageous, and educated leadership, these girls have given the world the wake-up call we so badly needed. As the title of Thunberg's book says, no one is too small to make a difference. And that echoes for me what I often heard my friend Kofi Annan say, you are never too young to lead, you are never too old to learn. Over 20 years ago, a group of women in Northern Ireland, most of whom had never engaged in formal politics, came together and formed the Women's Coalition. They succeeded against all the odds in being elected to the multi-party forum convened for peace talks in Northern Ireland. Through their participation at the negotiating table, they ensured that provisions on integrated education, housing, the needs of victims, reconciliation, and equality were included in the Good Friday Agreement. These elements, introduced by women into the Good Friday Agreement, have been critical to sustaining peace in the 2 decades that have followed, because they went to the root causes of the conflict and helped to imagine a positive vision of Northern Ireland for the future. In Sudan last year, young women were to the forefront of a movement calling for an end to an authoritarian rule, which has culminated in that country embarking on a 3-year transition towards democracy. And we must make sure that it succeeds in that transition. And in Lebanon, just a few months ago, thousands of women joined a human chain stretching for over 100 miles along the coast, delivering a message of love, of togetherness, and of national unity. Right around the world, young women and girls are raising their voices and clamoring for change. The change they're clamoring for is a change that we all need. They're demanding climate action, peace, human rights, equality, education, and sustainable development. Girls and youth that we heard are the voice of conscience. They have everything to gain by disrupting the status quo and encouraging us to break with the failed approaches that keep us locked in the cycles of conflict, inequality, and overconsumption. Those who stand to gain from the status quo are not the ones who will address its problems, but they are not the ones to advocate for the change we urgently need if we're to confront the existential crisis that humanity is facing. For too long, the voices of women and girls have often been excluded from decisions on how the world should be, shut off from the levers of power, and often confined to the domestic sphere. Education, education, education is what gives voice to girls and women, as we've seen so powerfully today. The Beijing Declaration of 25 years ago rightly insisted, and I quote, "Equality of access to and attainment of educational qualifications is necessary if more women are to become agents of change." It reaffirmed that education was a human right and an essential tool for achieving equality, development, and peace. And yet, as we've also heard, 25 years on, despite the excellent progress we've made in educational attainment for boys and girls at primary school, still we see that girls face a cliff edge when they reach puberty and find themselves excluded from school due to cost, domestic responsibilities, the burden of negative norms and societal expectations, early marriage, and early pregnancy. Just 13% of girls in lower income countries complete upper secondary education. And for those who do remain in school, the gap in learning outcomes and quality of education is significant. So just think of all those girls in the 25 years since Beijing whose expectations we didn't meet, and what a loss to the world. Friends, I happen to be impatient. I grew up in an Ireland that was a cold house for many women and lived through the blossoming of feminist movements in the 1970s, the retrenchments of the 1980s, and the hopes of the Beijing generation. I'm a grandmother now. I think I call myself an angry granny. And I have no time to waste. 25 years on from Beijing, we simply must do better and faster. Far too many girls remain excluded from education simply because they're girls. As we look forward to a gathering together in Mexico in May and in Paris in July, to once again beat the drum for gender equality, let's commit to working together to guarantee all girls 12 years of free, quality education, to giving them the confidence and skills to participate fully in society, employment and leadership, to keeping them safe from violence, and to ensuring their access to healthcare, to good nutrition and sanitation. If we can do this, we will set off what I think will be a cascade of possibility and positive change from which all of us will benefit. I'd go further and argue that we don't actually have a choice. Achieving the universal education of girls, and by extension, gender equality, is an imperative, which, if we choose to ignore it, will set us on a path of certain catastrophe. But let's not end with a warning. As chair of the elders, I'm always mandated to bring hope. And I often quote my dear friend, Archbishop Tutu, who described himself not as an optimist, but as a prisoner of hope. I too am a prisoner of hope. But this is a very agreeable prison, and I'm kept in very good company and in high spirits because of the guardians of my prison, who are the young people, and most especially girls. To them, we entrust our hopes for a better, more peaceful, and more sustainable world. And let's give them the education they have a right to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Robinson. I have to say you're my all-time favorite angry granny, if that's, and you embody the best of what we can be here. Thank you again. Now, as we wrap up, we're in for a real treat, a very short musical interlude. We have arriving now in the room a unique gathering of musicians. They'll be playing traditional Irish instruments, uilleann pipes and Irish harp. They will be singing with the UN choir, with the Peace Into Multicultural Chorus, which is a choir of immigrant children from right around the globe who are actually living here in the United States. They are joined by five, they should come in now, I think. They're joined by 5 young people from Music Generation, which is Ireland's national music education programme. It's a partnership between U2, the Ireland Funds, the government, and local groups. Music Generation is astonishing. It just seeks to transform children and young people's lives by giving access to music tuition in their local communities. Remarkably, as they join us here on the stage, they will be singing in our own Irish language. There are 20 nationalities in this group. They will sing an Irish song, a lullaby, Shohin Show, and finish or sing also a song entitled, appropriately today, I think, as we work to raise up girls, You Raise Me Up. That song was actually written by an Irishman, Brendan Graham, and it's the world's most downloaded sheet music. So, friends, we invite ourselves to a real treat as people gather and need to move this podium out of the way, right? You're very welcome.